5 years after first contact, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Galactic Council had been reformed as the Democratic Federation of Worlds, with Earth holding no more voting power than any other member species. President Da-Yun addressed the assembly from the same chamber where humanity had once been dismissed as harmless. "We have learned that strength without wisdom leads to tyranny," she said, her words translated into hundreds of languages. "Humanity offers not domination but partnership, not conquest but cooperation." Captain Hae-Jin, now an admiral, commanded joint patrol fleets that kept the space lanes safe from the remnants of various fallen empires. The human talent for warfare had not disappeared, but it was now channeled into protection rather than conquest. Professor Wansik established the Galactic University on a former Apex stronghold world, where young beings from across the galaxy learned together. Human and alien children played in the same playgrounds where once slave markets had operated. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. Some species still harbored resentments, some humans still dreamed of empire, but a new generation was growing up in a galaxy where cooperation was rewarded over conquest. Ambassador Tae-min, now elderly but satisfied, often met with his old friend Admiral Hyun-woo to watch the ships of the Joint Fleet patrol peacefully through space that had once echoed with the screams of the dying. "Did you ever imagine it would end this way?" Tae-min asked during one such meeting. Hyun-woo smiled, his own hair now white with age. "Honestly, I feared humanity would become just another empire. But perhaps that's what makes us truly dangerous. Not our capacity for violence, but our capacity to choose peace when we could choose war." The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate a species that has spent millennia learning how to survive anything the universe could throw at them. But more importantly, they had learned that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when not to use that power. In the end, the Apex Empire was, indeed, dust. But from that dust had grown something far more beautiful, a galaxy united not in fear but in hope. The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with thousands of alien beings from across the known universe. Commander Hyun-woo walked slowly through the massive doors, his military boots echoing against the crystal floor that sparkled like diamonds under the artificial suns hanging from the ceiling. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the other delegates, but the scars on his weathered face told stories of battles fought in the darkest corners of space. The translator device attached to his collar hummed softly as it picked up the hundreds of different languages being spoken around him. At the center of the great hall stood a tall podium made from some kind of glowing metal that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Ambassador Tae-min from the Centauri Coalition was already there, waiting, his forearms folded across his chest as he reviewed his notes one final time. Tae-min had been a friend to Earth. For many years, one of the few beings in the galaxy who understood that humans were different from other species. He had seen the reports that came from the outer colonies, the whispered stories about what humans could do when they were pushed too far. The noise in the hall was incredible. Delegates shouted at each other in languages that sounded like grinding metal or rushing water or singing birds. The translator devices worked overtime, trying to make sense of it all, creating a symphony of overlapping voices that rose and fell like ocean waves. Commander Hyun-woo found his seat in the human section, which was small and tucked away in a corner like an afterthought. Next to him sat Captain Ji-ho, a woman who had served in more space, battles than most aliens had even heard of. Her dark eyes scanned the crowd, constantly watching for threats that might never come. "Look at them," Ji-ho whispered to Hyun-woo, as she nodded toward the section where the Apex Empire delegates sat. "They think they rule the universe. The Apex Empire took up nearly a quarter of the hall, their delegates massive creatures that stood 3 meters tall with thick armor covering their bodies and glowing red eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. Their leader, General Vextar, was the largest of them all, his mechanical voice translator making him sound like a machine built for war. Behind the Apex sat the hegemony delegates, who looked like giant slugs made of purple slime, but Hyunwoo knew better than to judge by appearances. These creatures had conquered more worlds than any other species in the galaxy, using their incredible intelligence and complete lack of mercy. The crystalline empire sent representatives that looked like walking diamonds. Beautiful to see but cold as the space between stars, they communicated through light patterns that flashed across their bodies, creating a light show that was hypnotic to watch. Honored delegates. Tai Min began, his voice amplified by the hall's systems, so that even those in the farthest seats could hear him clearly. We gather today to discuss a matter of great importance to all our civilizations. A wave of interest rippled through the crowd. The Galactic Council rarely called emergency sessions unless something truly dangerous was happening. The last time had been when the Void Plague threatened to consume entire star systems. Our scout ships have been monitoring the third planet of the Sol system for the past decade. Taemin continued, "What we have discovered should concern us all." Hyunwoo felt his heart begin to beat faster. He knew what was coming, and he knew how the other delegates would react. They had no idea what humans were really capable of. The species that calls itself humanity has developed at an unprecedented rate, Taemin said as holographic images appeared above the podium showing Earth from space. In less than a century, they have gone from primitive flying machines to faster-than-light travel. Some delegates leaned forward with interest, but others were already starting to whisper among themselves. A few even laughed, thinking this was some kind of joke. But speed of development is not what concerns us. Taemin went on. It is the nature of their development. Every advance they have made has been driven by conflict. They have weaponized everything from the smallest particles of matter to the largest celestial bodies. The whispers grew louder now, and Hyunwoo could see delegates shaking, their heads in disbelief. How could one small planet be a threat to civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds? Young diplomat So Young stood up from the human section, her tablet already displaying detailed images of Earth's military installations. She was barely 30 years old, but she had studied alien psychology for most of her life, and she knew exactly how to present information to get the maximum impact. "If I may address the council," she said, her voice steady despite the thousands of eyes now focused on her. These images show the current state of human military capability. The holographic display changed to show massive underground bunkers filled with nuclear weapons, space platforms bristling with energy cannons, factories that could switch from making farming equipment to making battle tanks in a matter of hours. What you see here is the result of a species that has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. So Young explained, they have not had the luxury of easy conquest against primitive civilizations. Instead, they have spent thousands of years learning how to fight enemies who are just as intelligent and just as desperate as they are. General Vextar's mechanical laughter boomed across the hall like thunder. "You expect us to fear a species that still fights with projectile weapons?" he said, his red eyes glowing brighter with amusement. "We have energy shields that can stop their primitive bullets. Have you seen what they can do with projectile weapons?" So Young asked calmly. She changed the holographic display to show a human railgun firing a metal slug at incredible speed. This projectile travels at 30% the speed of light. It can punch through the hull of your strongest battleship like it was made of paper. More laughter erupted from different sections of the hall. The idea that primitive kinetic weapons could threaten advanced energy shields seemed ridiculous to beings who had mastered antimatter and controlled gravity, Glutharks. The hegemony representative oozed forward to the speaking area, his purple slime body rippling with what might have been amusement. "We have conquered 1,000 worlds," he said in a voice that sounded like liquid, being poured. "What makes these mammals any different from the countless others we have enslaved?" Captain Jiho stood up, her military bearing commanding attention, even from beings 3 times her size. "Because we have never been conquered." She said simply, "Every other species you have defeated was either peaceful or had only fought against others like themselves. Humans have spent 50,000 years learning how to kill things that want to kill them back." The hall erupted in chaos, as delegates began shouting in dozens of languages. Some demanded more proof, while others dismissed the warnings entirely. The Apex Empire delegates were pounding their armored fists on their seats, creating a sound like thunder. Silence called. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species was so old that no one remembered their original name. "We will now vote on whether to take action regarding the Sol system. All in favor of preemptive strikes, raise your appendages." Very few delegates raised anything. Most were still laughing or talking among themselves about the absurd idea that humans could threaten the established galactic order. "All in favor of increased monitoring," the speaker continued. A few more delegates responded, but not many. "All in favor of no action." Almost every delegate in the hall raised their arms or tentacles or whatever they used for voting. The message was clear. The galaxy wanted nothing to do with what they saw as paranoid warnings about a primitive species. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, many were still chuckling about the presentation. Commander Hyun-woo and Captain Ji-ho walked slowly toward the exit, watching as representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy dismissed humanity as nothing more than an amusing curiosity. "They have no idea what they have just done," Hyun-woo said quietly to Ji-ho as they reached the great doors. "No." Ji-ho agreed, watching as General Vextar strode past them without even acknowledging their existence. "But they will learn." Behind them, Ambassador Tae-min was gathering his notes with the help of So Young. Both looked tired and worried. They had done everything they could to warn the galaxy, but no one had listened. "What do we do now?" So Young asked as she packed away her tablet. "We go home," Tae-min replied, "and we prepare for what comes next. Because whether the galaxy believes it or not, the humans are coming. And when they do, everything will change." News of Admiral Kex Noir's defeat spread through the galactic communication networks faster than the speed of light itself, on the apex homeworld of Korthax. Emperor Zorth Khan received the reports in his massive throne room, a chamber carved from a single mountain and decorated with the skulls of 1,000 conquered species. Emperor Zorth Khan stood 4 meters tall, even larger than his generals, his obsidian armor crackling with contained energy that could level city blocks with a single discharge. For 3 centuries, he had ruled the Apex Empire, expanding it from a single world to a domain spanning half the galaxy. "Impossible!" He roared, his voice shaking the crystalline windows of his throne room. "No primitive world has ever defeated an Apex fleet." "Tell me again what happened." General Vextar, who had laughed at the human warnings just months earlier, now stood before his emperor with his head bowed in shame. "My lord, the humans did not fight as expected. They used tactics we had never encountered. Their ships were small and fast. They targeted our weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Emperor Zorth Khan's eyes blazed red. The Apex Empire has no weaknesses, but deep down he knew that was not true. The Empire had grown soft over the centuries, conquering only weak civilizations that surrendered at the first sign of force. When was the last time they had faced an enemy that fought back with real determination, On Earth, the defeat of the Apex fleet had triggered the largest military mobilization. In human history, Lieutenant Colonel Sung Min stood in the Pentagon's deepest bunker, watching holographic displays that showed industrial output across the planet. Factories that had been making cars and computers just days before were now producing warships and weapons at a rate that would have been impossible for any other species. Humans had learned, during their world wars, how to transform entire economies for battle in a matter of weeks. Production reports, he called out, tank factories, are at 200% capacity, reported his aide, Major Hyojin. We have converted civilian spacecraft manufacturing to military production. Weapon stockpiles are increasing exponentially, Sung Min nodded grimly. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt and overcome. They had survived ice ages, plague wars, and disasters that would have destroyed other species. Now they were preparing for their greatest challenge, yet in orbit around Earth, massive construction. Projects were taking shape. Human engineers worked alongside alien refugees who had fled from Apex territory. These beings brought knowledge of advanced technologies that humans quickly learned to improve upon. The first human dreadnought was taking shape in lunar orbit, a massive vessel that combined the best of human engineering with alien technology. But it was not just one ship. Humans were building them by the dozens using mass production techniques that amazed their alien allies. Major Hyojin led the first human deep space reconnaissance mission, her stealth ships slipping through Apex territory like ghosts in the night. What they discovered shocked even veteran intelligence officers. The Apex Empire was vast, but it was also brittle. Their ships were powerful but standardized. Their tactics had not evolved in centuries because they had never needed to evolve. They had been beating up children for so long they had forgotten how to fight adults. Command, this is Recon Team Alpha. Hyojin transmitted from the bridge of her ship as she watched an Apex supply convoy moving through space. The enemy is using the same shipping routes they have used for decades. Same escort patterns, same everything. They have no concept of operational security. Copy that, Alpha, came the reply from Earth. Can you identify weaknesses? Hyojin smiled as she studied the alien ships through her sensors. Command, their entire supply chain is centralized. They have no redundancy. If we hit their main depots, their entire sector goes dark. Understood. Alpha, begin target acquisition. The response to Admiral Kex Noir's defeat came 6 months later when Emperor Zorth Khan himself arrived at the edge of the Sol system with the largest fleet in Apex. History: 3,000 ships of every class, from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack craft. Zorth Khan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, a vessel so large it had its own gravitational field. Around him, his bridge crew worked at stations that controlled enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. Today we end this insult to Apex honor, he announced over the fleet communication system. These humans will learn what happens when primitives dare to challenge their betters. But when his fleet arrived at Earth, they found a solar system transformed. The space between planets bristled with weapons platforms. Asteroid fields had been converted into mobile fortresses. Automated defense systems created overlapping fields of fire that would shred any attacking force. Most disturbing of all, the human fleet was nowhere to be seen. Sir, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system, reported his sensor officer. But I cannot locate their main battle fleet. They are hiding like cowards, Zorth Khan declared. Begin systematic bombardment of their defensive positions. We will blast them out of their holes. The Apex fleet advanced in perfect formation. Just as they had done for centuries, their massive guns began, charging, preparing to unleash devastating barrages that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Then the humans struck. They did not come from one direction or even from space. Human ships erupted from the atmosphere of every planet and moon in the system. They had been hiding in gravitational shadows using the solar system itself as camouflage. The attack was coordinated with a precision that took Zorth Khan's breath away. Hundreds of human ships struck his formation, simultaneously targeting command, vessels, and support craft. They ignored his heavy battleships, focusing instead on the ships that made his fleet function. "Sir, they are targeting our supply ships," his tactical officer reported. "Without supplies, the battle fleet cannot maintain operations. Then protect the supply ships." Zorth Khan roared, but it was too late. The humans had studied Apex tactics for months. They knew exactly how the Empire's forces would respond. Every move Zorth Khan made had been anticipated and countered human. Fighters launched suicide attacks against Apex command ships. Their pilots did not try to escape, instead ramming their vessels into bridges and weapon control centers. The psychological impact was devastating. Apex crews had never faced an enemy willing to die for victory. The battle for Seoul lasted 3 months. Zorth Khan's massive fleet found itself fighting not one large battle, but thousands of small engagements. Human forces would strike, then vanish before the Apex could respond. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks that slowly bled the Imperial fleet. When human ships were heavily damaged, their crews would evacuate to nearby rescue vessels, then detonate their ships as weapons. These explosions were precisely timed to cause maximum damage to Apex formations. "My lord, we have lost 60% of our fleet," reported General Vex Tar. "The humans are not fighting according to any known tactical doctrine." Because they wrote the doctrine, Zorth Khan realized with growing horror. "They have been at war for thousands of years. Every trick we try they have seen before." The final battle came when human forces launched a coordinated assault on Zorth Khan's flagship itself. Dozens of human ships attacked the Eternal, conquest overwhelming its defenses through sheer audacity. Emperor Zorth Khan died on his bridge as human marines stormed through his ship. He died not understanding how beings he considered primitive had defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy. The destruction of the Apex Emperor and his grand fleet sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the seemingly invincible Empire showed weakness. Conquered worlds began to whisper of rebellion, and in the ruins of the Sol System human salvage crews were already at work, studying Apex technology, learning their secrets, preparing for the next phase of what they knew would be a long war. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could do when they were truly motivated to fight. 3 months after the council meeting, Admiral Kex Noir stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator, watching the small blue planet grow larger on his main viewing screen. The Apex Empire's third fleet stretched out behind him, 500 massive warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities. With a single blast, Kex Noir was considered one of the Empire's greatest military minds, having conquered 47 worlds in his long career. Most of those conquests had taken less than a day. The primitive civilizations usually surrendered as soon as they saw the size of his fleet. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the planet," reported his communications officer, a younger Apex warrior named Drex Han. "They are speaking in their native language, but the translators are working." "Put it through," Kex Noir ordered, settling back in his command chair. The main screen changed to show the interior of what looked like an underground bunker. A human female sat at a large table surrounded by military officers and advisors. President Da-Un looked directly into the camera, her expression calm but determined. Behind her stood General Min-ho, a man whose uniform bore the marks of someone who had seen real combat. Unlike the ceremonial armor of most galactic leaders, his gear was practical and worn. "I am President Da-Un of the United Earth Government," she said through the translator system. "To whom am I speaking?" Kex Noir laughed, his mechanical voice echoing through the bridge. I am Admiral Kex Noir of the Apex Empire Third Fleet. You will address me as your superior and prepare for immediate surrender." The human leader did not flinch or show any sign of fear. Instead, she leaned forward slightly as if she was studying him through the screen. "Admiral, I suggest you reconsider your position. You are in violation of interstellar law by entering our system with hostile intent." Interstellar law. Kex Noir scoffed. "The strong make the law, child. You're pathetic. Little world will become a labor colony of the Apex Empire. Your people will serve us or they will die. It is that simple." In the bunker, General Minho stepped forward and whispered something in President Da-Un's ear. She nodded once, then looked back at the screen. "Admiral, you have 24 hours to withdraw from our system peacefully. If you do not, we will be forced to defend ourselves." The bridge of the Devastator erupted in laughter. Kex Noir's officers could barely contain their amusement at the idea that this primitive world thought it could threaten them. "Defend yourselves," Kex Noir wheezed. "With what my sensors show, you have a few dozen ships barely capable of reaching your own moon. We have what we need, President." Da-Un replied simply, 24 hours, Admiral. I suggest you use them wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Kex Noir staring at a blank screen. He had never encountered such arrogance from a primitive species. Usually they begged for mercy or tried to negotiate for better terms. These humans seemed to actually believe they could fight back. In her bunker beneath Seoul, President Da-Un turned to her military advisors. The room was filled with holographic displays showing the positions of the Apex fleet and the readiness status of Earth's hidden defenses. "Analysis," she said simply. Dr. Yunji, the head of military research, stepped forward, her tablet showing detailed scans of the alien ships. "Their technology is impressive, but predictable. Their ships are built for intimidation, not efficiency. Look at these power distribution patterns." She gestured to a three-dimensional model of an Apex battleship that rotated slowly in the air. "They put most of their energy into shields and big guns, but their engines are relatively weak. They're designed to overwhelm primitive civilizations, not fight a real battle." General Minho nodded as he studied the tactical displays. "Their formation is textbook too, probably hasn't changed in centuries. They expect enemies to either run away or charge straight at them. They have no concept of asymmetric warfare." "Then let's teach them," President Da-Un said quietly. 24 hours later, Admiral Kex Noir was growing impatient. He had given the humans their deadline, expecting them to surrender at the last moment. Instead, his sensors showed increased activity around their planet, ships moving cargo equipment being deployed. Strange energy signatures appearing throughout their system, sir. "The deadline has passed," reported Drexhan. "What are your orders?" "Begin the bombardment," Kex Noir commanded. "Target their major cities. Show them what happens when they defy the Apex Empire." The massive guns of the Third Fleet swiveled toward Earth and began charging their energy weapons. But before they could fire, space around the human world suddenly came alive. Hidden weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids revealed themselves, launching swarms of kinetic projectiles at incredible speeds. The humans had turned their entire asteroid belt into a weapons factory. Small, fast ships erupted from concealed bases on the dark side of Earth's moon. They moved like angry insects, swarming around the much larger Apex vessels. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards, but they were used with a precision that stunned the Apex crews. "Sir, we are taking heavy casualties," reported his tactical officer. "These human ships, they are not following any known combat patterns." Kex Noir watched in amazement as human fighters dove between his battleships, firing at weak points that his own people had never even considered vulnerabilities. The humans were not trying to destroy his ships outright. Instead, they were crippling them, cutting power lines, severing communication arrays, making it impossible for his fleet to coordinate. "How are they targeting our systems so precisely?" he demanded. "Sir, I believe they have been studying our ship designs, our formation patterns. They know exactly where our weak points are." The battle raged for 6 hours, and it was unlike anything Kex Noir had ever experienced. The humans fought with a desperation and creativity that he had never encountered. Their ships were individually weak, but they worked together like a single organism. When human ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews would ram them into Apex vessels rather than retreat. The psychological impact on his forces was devastating. His crews had never faced an enemy, willing to die for victory. By the end of the day, Kex Noir's mighty Third Fleet was in ruins. Half his ships were destroyed or drifting powerless in space. The survivors were scattered and demoralized, facing an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human planet." Drexhan reported, his voice shaking. President Da-Yun appeared on screen again, but this time she was not in her bunker. She stood in what looked like a military command center, with dozens of officers working at combat stations behind her. "Admiral Kex Noir," she said calmly, "you now have 12 hours to withdraw what remains of your fleet from our system. Any ship that has not left by then will be destroyed. Do you understand?" Kex Noir stared at the screen, unable to process what had happened. His invincible fleet had been crushed by a species that the Galactic Council considered primitive. "How is this possible? This is not overhuman," he managed to say. "The Apex Empire will return. With a larger fleet, you cannot defeat us all." President Da-Un smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, we have been fighting wars for 50,000 years. We know how to do this, and next time we will be ready for you." The transmission ended, and Kex Noir was left staring at the burning wreckage of his ships scattered across the human solar system. For the first time in his career, he gave the order to retreat as the surviving Apex ships limped away from Earth. The news of their defeat began spreading across the galaxy. The humans had not just survived the first contact with a major galactic power, they had won decisively, and in the depths of space, human engineers were already studying the wreckage of Apex technology, learning, adapting, preparing for the war they knew was coming. Captain Wansik stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's first true battleship, built from the bones of defeated Apex vessels and powered by technology that would have been impossible just a year before. The massive ship hummed with barely contained power as it slipped through hyperspace toward its target. Around him, his crew worked with the efficient precision that had become the hallmark of human space forces. These were not the untested recruits who had defended Earth. They were veterans now hardened by months of combat against the galaxy's most feared military power. "Captain, we are approaching the Kepler station," reported his navigation officer, Lieutenant Yon Su. "All systems are green and ready for combat operations." Wansik nodded as he studied the tactical displays that showed their target. Kepler Station was one of the Apex Empire's most important military depots, a massive structure that supplied weapons and equipment to 3 entire sectors of Apex space intelligence. Officer Kim Yon-soo had spent weeks analyzing captured Apex databases, learning their language, their culture, their deepest fears. What she had discovered would change the nature of warfare forever. "Captain, I have finished my analysis of Apex psychology," she reported as she joined him on the bridge. "The beautiful thing about bullies is that they have never learned to handle real resistance. The Apex have spent so long terrorizing helpless civilizations that they have forgotten how to fight a real war." The plan for attacking Kepler Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans did not simply want to destroy the facility. They wanted to turn it into a weapon against the Empire itself. "All ships report ready for Operation Shockwave," came the voice of Admiral Sungmin over the communication system. The human task force consisted of 50 ships, each one loaded with weapons and equipment that had been specifically designed for this mission. Execute. Wan Sik ordered the human ships. Dropped out of hyperspace around Kepler Station with perfect coordination, the massive Apex facility was defended by energy shields and automated weapon systems that should have been impregnable. But humans had learned something that other species had forgotten. Shields and weapons were operated by people, and people could be frightened. The attack began not with weapons, but with broadcasts. Human ships transmitted recordings of the destruction of Emperor Zorth Khan's fleet. The images of burning Apex vessels and dying warriors were transmitted on every frequency the Empire used. The psychological impact was immediate. Apex defenders who had never seen their forces defeated suddenly found themselves watching their Emperor die over and over. Again, morale collapsed even before the shooting started. When the actual assault began, it was swift and brutal. Human Marines led by Sergeant Nam Jun stormed through the station's corridors. Their combat armor was painted with images of the Apex defeats, and they fought with a ferocity that terrified their enemies. But the humans did something that shocked even their own allies. They took prisoners. "Why are we not killing them all?" asked one of the Centauri observers who had come along to document the battle. "Because dead enemies cannot be questioned," Nam Jun replied as his soldiers secured another group of Apex warriors. "And they cannot spread stories about what happened here," the interrogation of captured Apex personnel revealed. The locations of dozens of other military installations, supply routes, troop movements. Even the location of the Emperor's hidden bunker, where the new Apex leadership was trying to reorganize their forces. But more importantly, the humans recorded everything. Every moment of the battle, every surrender, every terrified Apex warrior begging for mercy, all of it was broadcast across the galaxy on every communication frequency that existed. The psychological warfare was devastating. The Apex Empire had built its power on fear and intimidation. Suddenly, they were the ones being terrorized. Their own propaganda networks were hijacked to show images of human victory and Apex defeat. Colonel Dong Ha led the liberation of Proxima Colony, the first non-human world to be freed from Apex control. The indigenous population had been enslaved for over a century, forced to work in mining operations that stripped their world bare. When human ships arrived in orbit, the Apex garrison prepared for the usual siege tactics they had used for centuries. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human drop pods fell from the sky like rain. Each one contained soldiers who had studied the layout of every Apex facility on the planet. They moved through the colony with surgical precision, targeting exactly the right locations to cause maximum disruption. Attention Apex forces. Dong Ha broadcast on all frequencies. "You have 60 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate what happens to those who enslave innocent people." The Apex commander tried to rally his forces, but his troops had already seen the recordings from Kepler Station. They knew what humans did to those who resisted. They surrendered without firing a shot. The liberated colonists watched in amazement as human soldiers not only freed them, but began immediately distributing food and medical supplies. The contrast with Apex brutality could not have been greater. "Why? Do you help us?" asked the colonial leader, an elderly being whose species resembled large insects. "We are not your people." "Because that is what humans do." Dong Ha replied simply, "We protect those who cannot protect themselves." Word of the liberation spread through the underground networks that connected enslaved worlds across the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, conquered peoples began to believe that freedom might be possible. The Apex Council of War met in emergency session deep beneath their homeworld. The massive chamber was filled with the Empire's greatest military minds, all trying to understand how their invincible forces had been defeated by primitives. "How many worlds have we lost?" asked acting Emperor Drex Khan, who had assumed power after Zorth Khan's death. 17 sectors have declared independence, reported General Vex Tar. Our supply lines are in chaos. Our fleets are scattered. The humans have destroyed our ability to coordinate large-scale operations. Then, we will adapt. Drexcon declared, we will learn their tactics and use them against them. My lord, with respect, we cannot adapt that quickly. Vextar said carefully, the humans have been fighting wars for 50,000 years. Every tactic we try, they have already seen. They have counters for strategies we have not even thought of yet. The truth was becoming clear to the Apex leadership. They were not just fighting humans, they were fighting the products of a world that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Every conflict, every battle, every war had taught humanity new ways to kill and survive. Reports continued to pour in from across the Empire. Rebellions on a dozen worlds, human forces striking at supply depots and communication centers, the psychological warfare that was breaking the will of Apex forces to fight. Sir, we are receiving a transmission, reported a communications officer. It is from the human fleet. The main screen activated to show Captain Wan Sik standing on the bridge of his ship. Behind him, the wreckage of Kepler Station burned in space like a funeral pyre for the Apex Empire. This is Captain Wan Sik of the United Earth Navy. He said, his voice calm and professional. I am authorized to offer terms. For the surrender of all Apex forces in this sector, the council chamber erupted in rage. How dare these primitives offer terms to the Apex Empire? But Drexcon held up a hand for silence. He had seen the reports. He knew what the humans were capable of. What terms? He asked quietly. Complete withdrawal from all conquered worlds. Wansik replied, dismantling of all military bases, reparations to enslaved populations, and trials for war crimes committed during your conquests. And if we refuse, Wansik's expression did not change. Then we will continue to destroy your forces until you have no choice but to accept our terms. The only question is how many of your people have to die first. The transmission ended, leaving the Apex leadership staring at a blank screen. For the first time in their species' history, they were faced with the possibility of total defeat. Outside in the corridors of their underground fortress, they could hear the sounds of their own people beginning to panic. The invincible Apex Empire was crumbling, and everyone knew it. The humans were coming, and they were winning. Ambassador G1 walked slowly through the corridors of Harmony Station, the massive neutral space facility that floated in empty space between the territories of a dozen different species. She could feel the eyes of hundreds of beings watching her as she passed, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed fear. The human delegation was small. Just 12 people compared to the massive entourages that other species had brought, but their reputation preceded them. These were the beings who had brought the mighty Apex Empire to its knees in less than 2 years of warfare. The main conference chamber was vast enough to hold representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The crystalline empire sent delegates whose bodies flickered with nervous light patterns. The hegemony representatives oozed forward on their slug-like bodies, leaving trails of slime that janitors quickly cleaned up. But it was the empty seats that drew the most attention. The Apex Empire had been invited to send representatives, but their once proud delegation consisted of only 3 beings, huddled together at a small table in the corner. Admiral Hyun-woo entered the chamber, wearing the simple uniform of Earth's Space Navy. The scars on his face had not healed from the early battles, but they had become symbols of human determination. His presence commanded respect even from beings who towered over him. Honored delegates, he began, as the chamber fell silent. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as potential partners in building a better galaxy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, The species that had once laughed at human warnings now hung on every word. Most had seen what happened to those who opposed humanity. The Apex Empire is finished. Admiral Han Wu continued. Their military is scattered, their leadership is in chaos, and their conquered worlds are declaring independence, but we did not come here to gloat over their defeat. We came to offer something different. Ambassador Tae Min of the Centauri Coalition rose from his seat, the four-armed being moving with the dignity that had made him humanity's first ally. If I may address the assembly, he said, the Centauri Coalition formally requests alliance with the United Earth government. The request sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Centauri were one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in the galaxy. Their endorsement carried enormous weight. The humans have proven that strength, without wisdom, leads to tyranny. Tae Min continued, but they have also proven that they possess both the power to destroy and the wisdom to build. We have seen how they treat their defeated enemies. We have seen how they liberate enslaved worlds. Ji-Wan stood and activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Nearly half of the Apex Empire's former territory was now free independent worlds that had thrown off centuries of oppression. We propose the formation of a new organization, she announced. The Democratic Federation of Worlds, where each species has an equal voice regardless of military power or economic strength. The proposal was radical. In galactic politics, power had always determined influence. The strong ruled the weak, and that was simply the natural order. But humans were suggesting something different. Dr. Yunji, who now headed the Joint Technological Development Program, stepped forward. We offer to share our knowledge freely, she said, not as masters distributing gifts to servants, but as equals working together for mutual benefit. The presentation that followed showed incredible advances that had been made by combining human ingenuity with alien knowledge. Weapons that could defend against any threat, ships that could travel faster than ever before, medical technology that could heal injuries that had once been fatal. The Crystalline Empire delegate flashed patterns of cautious interest across his body. You offer this freely? He asked through his translator. What do you gain from such generosity? Peace. Ji-Wan replied simply, humans have spent our entire history fighting wars. We are very good at it, but we would prefer not to. Cooperation is more efficient than conquest over. The following days, the negotiations continued. Species after species stepped forward to join the new federation. The aquatic Cetians brought their incredible navigation skills. The crystal beings of Altair offered advanced computing power. The peaceful farmers of Kepler provided agricultural knowledge, but it was the testimony of the liberated worlds that carried the most weight. Representatives from dozens of species that had been enslaved by the Apex spoke of human kindness, human soldiers who shared their rations with starving civilians, human doctors who worked tirelessly to heal the wounded regardless of species. They could have ruled us, testified the representative from Prox Severo Part 1. The warning falls on deaf ears. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with thousands of alien beings from across the known universe. Commander Hyun Woo walked slowly through the massive doors, his military boots echoing against the crystal floor that sparkled like diamonds under the artificial suns hanging from the ceiling. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the other delegates, but the scars on his weathered face told stories of battles fought in the darkest corners of space. The translator device attached to his collar hummed softly as it picked up the hundreds of different languages being spoken around him. At the center of the Great Hall stood a tall podium made from some kind of glowing metal that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Ambassador Tae Min from the Centauri Coalition was already there, waiting, his forearms folded across his chest as he reviewed his notes. one final time. Tae-min had been a friend to Earth for many years, one of the few beings in the galaxy who understood that humans were different from other species. He had seen the reports that came from the outer colonies, the whispered stories about what humans could do when they were pushed too far. The noise in the hall was incredible. Delegates shouted at each other in languages that sounded like grinding metal or rushing water or singing birds. The translator devices worked overtime trying to make sense of it all, creating a symphony of overlapping voices that rose and fell like ocean waves. Commander Hyun-woo found his seat in the human section, which was small and tucked away in a corner like an afterthought. Next to him sat Captain Ji-ho, a woman who had served in more space battles than most aliens had even heard of. Her dark eyes scanned the crowd, constantly watching for threats that might never come. "Look at them," Ji-ho whispered to Hyun-woo as she nodded toward the section where the Apex Empire delegates sat. "They think they rule the universe." The Apex Empire took up nearly a quarter of the hall, their delegates massive creatures that stood 3 meters tall with thick armor covering their bodies and glowing red eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. Their leader, General Vextar, was the largest of them, all his mechanical voice translator making him sound like a machine built for war. Behind the Apex sat the hegemony delegates who looked like giant slugs made of purple slime, but Hyun-woo knew better than to judge by appearances. These creatures had conquered more worlds than any other species in the galaxy, using their incredible intelligence and complete lack of mercy. The crystalline empire sent representatives that looked like walking diamonds, beautiful to see, but cold as the space between stars. They communicated through light patterns that flashed across their bodies, creating a light show that was hypnotic to watch. Honored delegates. Taemin began, his voice amplified by the halls. Systems, so that even those in the farthest seats could hear him clearly. "We gather today to discuss a matter of great importance to all our civilizations." A wave of interest rippled through the crowd. The Galactic Council rarely called emergency sessions unless something truly dangerous was happening. The last time had been when the Void Plague threatened to consume entire star systems. "Our scout ships have been monitoring the third planet of the Sol system for the past decade." Tae-min continued, "What we have discovered should concern us all." Hyun-woo felt his heart begin to beat faster. He knew what was coming, and he knew how the other delegates would react. They had no idea what humans were really capable of. The species that calls itself humanity has developed at an unprecedented rate, Taemin said, as holographic images appeared above the podium, showing Earth from space. "In less than a century, they have gone from primitive flying machines to faster-than-light travel, some." Delegates leaned forward with interest, but others were already starting to whisper among themselves. A few even laughed, thinking this was some kind of joke, but speed of development is not what concerns us. Tae-min went on. "It is the nature of their development. Every advance they have made has been driven by conflict. They have weaponized everything from the smallest particles of matter to the largest celestial bodies." The whispers grew louder now, and Hyun-woo could see delegates shaking, their heads in disbelief. How could one small planet be a threat to civilizations that spanned thousands of worlds? Young diplomat. So Young stood up from the human section, her tablet already displaying detailed images of Earth's military installations. She was barely 30 years old, but she had studied alien psychology for most of her life, and she knew exactly how to present information to get the maximum impact. "If I may address the council," she said, her voice steady, despite the thousands of eyes now focused on her. These images show the current state of human military capability. The holographic display changed to show massive underground bunkers filled with nuclear weapons, space